See we see today how we can create a web service and then how we can uh, like consume or invoke a web service. So in order to work with the web services, Boomi has different connectors. One is web service server connector. Web service server connector. This is basically to just implement a web service, implement or create a or expose a web service. And other thing would be we have another connector called web service so client connector. This is to consume the web service. Consume or invoke web services. Okay, let's see, why do you need to use a web service? What and all advantages? So advantages would be where as the name web service, it means accessing a service, accessing any services throughout the web. You may be creating a functionality of some service, and you wanted to access it throughout the web. Okay, so that's actually called a web service. So let's say a simple example is, let's say Flipkart and any other thing.
Mm-hmm.
But server is there somewhere else. But we are sitting here and we are just opening the site and we are just giving an order.
Correct.
We are a client. So what happens web service? Web service always works in client and server architecture. Means client will be sending some request and server would be receiving that request and then processing the request, and then after processing the request, server again would be sending the response back to the client.
Mm-hmm.
If server is able to process the request successfully, he'll send the response. Otherwise, he'll send the fault details. It means what are all the communication patterns. Communication pattern means how, like when the client sends a request, there will be two types. One is one-way service. One-way communication. Is basically here client sends request, not expecting response from server. This is what one-way communication. When the client sends a request to the server, server would be receiving that request, and then server will not send any response. This is what one-way communication means.
Mm-hmm.
We can say a shortcut. We can say called fire and forget. Means the client just triggering and just he'll be leaving out. This is
Okay.
what one.
Any particular examples?
Sorry.
Any particular real-time examples like when we use one-way communications?
So anything. See, you want to you have one of the email notification process. Okay, email notification process. Whenever you want to send an email notification, you'll be calling the service. The service would be taking the responsibility of what to whom and all we may need to send an email or anything. Or maybe you want to go for logging service. From the parent process, what will you just call the service? That's all. The service will automatically execute and do the logging purpose. Like that's what
Okay.
anything that whatever we write in the web service process, that will be. Next thing would be, let's say, two-way communication. In two-way communication, client sends a request and then server accepts the request, and server will send the response back to the client. Client either send the response or the we can say show fault exception. Many times if the server is not able to process the request properly and then it sends the response as so fault response. So these are the two ways how the web service will be exposing. Now, in order to web, so what are all the advantage of web service? The web services advantage would be, uh, let's say, there is a called platform neutrality. See, advantage would be the platform neutrality. Platform neutrality in the sense, let's say you have developed a web services, let's say using Boomi, and you are developed web services in Boomi and Windows environment or Linux environment. But when the client is consuming it, when client is trying to consume your web services, it means that it's not mandatory that you and the client both has to be has on the same tech platform. You may be created a web service on Linux environment. He may be consumed from the Windows environment.
Mm-hmm.
Platform neutrality. And another one is an technology neutrality. Let's say I have created a Boomi process. Okay, let's say you are the Salesforce guy. Okay, and you don't know, like, if you want to consume a Salesforce, you want to consume the Boomi web services, you don't need to have any understanding on what Boomi and what how Boomi will be doing all the things. Only thing is just need to have an idea how to trigger a web service. That's all from your
Okay.
application. It means that you don't need to understand each and every corresponding systems technology in order to work with systems. I have created some of the functionality in Boomi and I have given it to you. Yes, you can just call this. In order to call the services, you don't need to have any understanding of the what technology in which the web service has been created.
Mm-hmm.
That's mean technology independent. Technology independent. And let's say if I create a Boomi web services, any PHP guy, any Java guy, any .NET guy can able to consume the service. Vice versa. If any application has created a web service, I can able to consume it.
Okay. Yeah, I can't listen you.
Sorry, let's say reusability. This is the
So what is that second point, Vema, that you read? Intro, what is that?
interoperability.
Okay.
Interoperability in the sense of,
Okay.
yeah, interoperability in the sense it's independent of the technology.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Independent of the technology, because the client can be implemented anyway, any technology, and a server could be developed in any technology. It's not mandatory that both has to be on same.
Okay.
Next thing will be reusability. So like whenever you have interfaces are coming out, then you first thing what you will identify what and all part we can reusable.
Mm-hmm.
So you can consider the reusable functionality, and you can create a web services and you can reuse across multiple times. Okay, can't be reuse the same thing, like let's say when you are creating a web services, some of the piece of the code is reusability. Okay, in that case, let's say you want to send an email alerts. Okay, when you first order it, it'll be email, you'll order confirmation email will be sending it. Okay,
Sure.
after that maybe each and everything, when order is dispatching or order is fulfilling, again you'll be sending an email alert. But here, each and every time you will be sending an email alert would be a common process. But the what content, that content you'll be managing dynamically. So in this case, you need to develop a web services for sending an email alert. That should be a reusability. If you create when you are developing entire this interfaces order fulfillment, Under fulfillment in Boomi, what you can do, you can create a one of the child process for sending an email alert. You can each and every time you can call the web services. You can call that child process. No need to have an implement web service, but if you implement a web services, if you are using that functionality, right? If you are using that functionality, only Boomi guy can able to call that process. But if you expose the web services, any system can able to use this functionality. That's a difference. Just a second. Now we'll see first how to create a web services, and then once we
Mhm.
create web service, and then once we deploy the web services, and then we'll be able to see how we can call that web services.
Okay.
Okay. Now, as I tell you that web services is using the standard web services is a standard technology. It's independent of technology. So if you want to, like, let's say I am sending I'm the client. I'm sending a request, and server would be processing the request, and server would be sending the response. But what would be the structure? Each and every web services, the structure will not be same. That's the way how the server is implementing. Based on that, you need to send a request. If you send the request in expected format, then only web service will accept it. Otherwise, it will be rejected. So for that, there is a one file called WSDL. WSDL. This is one. This file basically describes the web services. Web service description language. Web service description language. WSDL web service almost all everything will be used independent of the technology. Okay, what all protocols it will be using? And I'm saying a client is sending a request to the server, but what is the protocol it is basically using it? So it basically uses the web service, in the sense web service will use the SOAP. SOAP is nothing but it's a simple object access protocol. This is the one of the data service call. This is the one data protocol. How you want to send, how you want to represent your data structure. This will be handling encoding and all the part.
Mhm.
This is the data protocol. But there should be some protocol, and it cannot able to carry your information, but I am sitting in the here and the server will be somewhere else. But it means information, the request data should has to travel from one place to another place. For that purpose we'll be using HTTP as a transport protocol. Transport protocol. So web services internally uses the HTTP as a transfer protocol for sending the information, for sending a request or receiving a response. It would be the, but data would be a soap data. Data would be a soap data, but that soap data will be carrying over HTTP.
Okay.
It's a transfer protocol. It can take the responsibility how to transfer what, what is the details it requires. Each and everything that will be taken care here. And next thing is, when I say what would be the structure, structure would be XML structure for everything. A request, a response, fault, whatever, you'll be using XML as a structure. Okay, this is what basically it has detailed protocols. Let's have a look on the sample WSL file, how it looks like. What and all, it
No.
really has all the details. Which part, what and all different elements are available. Let's look it here. Go back here. Let's Google it.
Uh, where my okay. Yeah.
Google it.
You okay?
Machine web service. Where is this WSDL file? Okay. Here is the sample WSDL how it looks like. Here you can see there is a what is the definition. What is your service name? Service name would be hello service. And what basically service will do, will have the it this particular service implements one feature, one function called hello service. Say hello, the one's function. Each and every functionality, each and every functionality, it represents in web services as an operation. Let's say when you're
Mm-hmm.
in the contact service, okay, contact service, there might be like a different functionality the contact service supports, like creating a contact, updating a contact, deleting a contact, or then retrieving the contact. This might be each and every operation. When each and every operation will be a specific functionality that will be service will be doing it. So all these functionality will be exposing in terms of an operation here. You can have any number of operations. That's it's not limited that only one operation you have to be create. For one service contain any number of service operations. But one thing is you don't need to create this WSDL manually. It Boomi automatically generates it. Okay, now will one service contain any number of operations. But each and every operation there should be a request. There should be a response. So the request would be represented in terms of an input and response would be represented in terms of an output. If it's
Mm-hmm.
under one operation, if you see only input, it means this is a one-way communication. If you see input and output, both the services, two-way communication. Each and input or output, whatever, it might be the request structure, it might be the message. So in order to create each and every operation, you should be having a request and response message will be created. So for that purpose, we'll be creating an object called an element called messages here. For this messages, if you are creating a see in this case it's a simple request. What is the request for this one is, this one is just saying sending some name, and you'll be getting the response in the same, like let's say just if you send a Venkat, right, you just get the hello Venkat. But this
Yeah.
simple service, what they are doing, we are not creating the corresponding XML structure. What would be with which will create an XML structure? XML structure would be created using the schemas. Schemas in terms of Boomi, what it is called? Profiles.
Yeah.
So if you need to create any schemas, there will be one more thing called types. In that types, you'll be creating all the schemas. That elements will be using in the messages. So message basically you can define any number of messages, but each message would be used either for the request or a response or fault. So you can accumulate, you can categorize all your operations across a multiple port types. You can just like assume that operation would be a file and port type would be a folder. When you have a multiple files, you may be organizing across a multiple directories, or within the same directory you'll be hosting all those files. Like port type here would be a just a kind of an organizer, organizing your all your operations. So this is nothing will be and you can have one port type can have a one operation or more than one operation. Next thing,
Okay.
after, as I told you, the SOAP is a data protocol, but you need to have you need to have given a transfer protocol. But transfer web service will support multiple types of transfer protocols. One is
Yes.
HTTP, FTP, SMTP, email. It can support n number of, but Movie will support only one of the transfer protocol called HTTP. This is a binding part.
Okay.
Basically, just binding your data protocol with a transfer protocol. And then finally you will be saying the service details called here. where exactly your particular service will be running. You have to give the proper host name and all the details. So this is the one, basically it gives us the details like when you hit on it, where you exactly service will be listening it. Okay, now we know what is the WSGL. Okay, by looking at WSGL, we'll able to tell whether it's a one-way communication or two-way communication, and where this particular service was listening, running. So we'll be able to identify. You can see the same thing here. Whatever the exam, the WSGL there, they have explained same thing. You can just Google it tutorial point, you'll get the same thing. Okay.
Okay.
Now we'll just we already have some of the tables we have created. Let's say customer table has been created. Okay, go for table.
I mean, it's just
Okay.
so nothing has been created here. So
Okay, so what we can do, we'll just create one of the table here.
okay.
Create a table. First, what I am doing here is I'll be creating a web services. What this web service will be doing, this web service will wrap the database. If I want to pull any particular record from the database, I'll be creating the web services to do the same functionality. Okay, now let me just add a table. Right click on a table, new table. But we have a local item is installed, right? Sure, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there. We can check it there.
Okay. Now let's say create a table called customers. Okay, it's a table called customers. So you can add n number of columns here. Let me see if you can directly copy paste this one. Let me just send you this file. Okay, it's not actually copy pasting, so I'll be just sending in chat message.
It's a DDL.
Yeah. So can you paste that whatever the message into this notepad, whatever the message I just ping you?
You can access it, right?
I think it's not opening it. Okay, I think now I got it.
Yeah, you can access it.
No, it's not. Can you just copy and paste it here? Notepad.
Okay. One second. ఎక్కడ ఉంది అది? I mean, it's there here.
It's there in chart. Go to meeting chart. Just open go to meeting chart.
Okay, just give 1 minute.
Hmm. Right. Right now, let's create a table. So instead of we go with this one, what we can quickly create a table here. Click on copy. Go for SQL developer. Why you have open to? Let me close one of the thing. Cancel everything. Close one of this one. Still there is a one more session is there. And now what we can do? Let's since we wanted to paste some run some script. What we can do? We open the right click here and open SQL worksheet. Okay, then
Okay.
here paste it here and then run this one. There will be one table gets created. Where is that? Not this one. Okay, now we'll just refresh it whether this one, okay, not this one table. Go for table, refresh it here. You can see there is a table is gets created. Now we'll just insert some of the records here. Using into different query builder. And now we have inserted one record. Let me run this one. Okay, now let's do the committing here. Now open the customer scene. Let's go back to data. Okay, now we can see there is a two records are there. Now we are ready to implement a service that queries the data from database. Now what we can do,
So we are now building a service that queries the data from the database, right? That's a web service.
yes. So I'll be sending a customer ID. I'll be sending a customer ID. Based on the customer ID, it will go, call the database and pull the record and then sending the customer record as a response to the database, response to the client. Now let's see how we can build that.
Okay.
Go back to build.
In the last. Oh,
Right now, let me just create a one more folder here called web service.
okay.
Inside there, we'll create all the things. Web service. Let's create a new component here. Create like query customers by ID. This is one of the service I wanted to create as a web service. So I'm just giving WS. Click on create. So when you want to create a web services, when you want to create a web service, the first connector you mandatorily need to use web services server connector in the start share.
Okay.
So when you select the web services server connector, action should only available is a listen. There is no other option called listen. Whenever you create a processes that has the listen action, you cannot able to test those processes in local. Only thing is we have deploy.
నాకు అర్థం కాలేదు మాది. What do you mean? So whenever we use a listen option.
Listen action, you cannot able to run this process in test mode here.
Yeah.
You're not able to run this process in test mode. Wherever the listen action is there, you cannot run into it. Only you can run in after deploy. So that's the reason we have web services when we deal with JMS, right? JMS also has the get, send and listen, but we have seen only get and send, did not see the listen. Why? Because
Good.
then we cannot run in local. Now action should be set to local. And for connection details, what will be the connection? Connection in the sense basically what would be the host name and what would be the port number. But where we can get these details? We can get these details. You can see Atom server will manage connection settings. Basically, wherever you deploy this particular process, and it automatically takes that but corresponding host name and the port number. I'll be showing this one after creating the process. Now go back to process. So as I told you, I'll be going to implement the customer web services.
Right.
I'll be
Mhm.
sending the customer ID as a request. I'll be sending customer ID as a request. So it means how do you want to send it? Because it's a, what is the functionality you are doing it. Depends on that you can just select the operation type. Now I wanted to go for query. It's not mandatory that you have to select, but based on what functionality you are doing it. Based on that you can.
Okay, okay, let us say మనము అప్డేట్ ఏమైనా తీసుకున్నాం అనుకో, సో అంటే ఇన్ వాట్ వే డస్ ఇట్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్
So giving you'll be adding it keywords. You can just observe it.
ఓకే దట్స్ ద సో పార్ట్ ఓకే
Now
సింపుల్.
I wanted to query. I wanted to build an operation. What would be my operation? My operation would be query customers by ID. The service I want. So when you give, if you want to make your operation name should be query customers by ID, you can select the what functionality you're doing. No, you want to go for query. Okay, query. After that, whatever you want, you have to place in object. That would be an operation name. Would be an operation name. Now input type. Input type is, let's say you want to set a single XML object or single data, whatever it is. Single object. It means single object in the sense what you want to send. I wanted to send a customer ID. I wanted to send customer ID as a request. So I'll be sending customer details as a response. So let's
Won't that be a single data object if it is a single, or
single
it doesn't matter?
XML object because I'll be
Okay,
sending the data in XML format.
okay.
Icon plus query customers. So when you are creating a web service, always follows this one request XML
Mhm.
and then response XML. This will be an operation name, and then request XML. Another one will be response XML. Now I want to send the customer, and I want to add one more an element called child element called customer ID.
ఇదేం ఇంపోర్ట్ చేయలేమా మనము? కెన్ వి నాట్ ఇంపోర్ట్ ఇట్?
Because you already showed you how to do import. As of now, we don't have a ready-made structure, so that's why I'm just manually creating simple structure.
Okay.
So this would be a number type. Now, so now what I wanted to have, I wanted to have the response output and single XML object. Go for the response, click on plus. In this example, I may be using the database, but you maybe use any source. Might be Salesforce or SuccessFactors. You can give any functionality. You can whatever the functionality you can create in Boomi, you can export as a web services.
Okay, in this case, we are using the database, right?
Yes, I'll be pulling the data from database. Maybe if you want to create a web services that should pull the data from the
Salesforce.
SuccessFactors, Salesforce. Yes, you can create all the things. So I just put in a customer that might be repeatable multiple times. and then I would be adding all the child elements.
మనము ఇంపోర్ట్ నుంచి డేటాబేస్ కాలం తీసుకోవచ్చు కదా.
So in that case, it would be a database profile, not an XML profile. Now we want to have an XML profile. We can see the profile, what type of profile it is. Let's say this is my response profile.
ఓకే.
Now go for save and close. So with this one, what I have, I already have the request and response profiles has been configured, and even my operation also has been configured. Web service server connector operation. So click on it. But when client sends a request, what would be the request structure? Request structure would be, this would be my request structure. If client is sending a request in this particular format, then as a server from Boomi, I am able to accept the request. After the request, if you process it and you want to send a response back to the client, for that what we need to use? We need to use a return document here. We need to use a return document here. And in between that, what I wanted to do here is, I wanted to call a process. A child process. That process will take all the responsibility of how you want to send the response. Now let me just call the process call. If you want to call a child process, what you need to do? You need to use a process call as an object that basically
What do you mean a child process here in this case, Vima?
I'll be creating all the querying the database based on the
Okay.
I'll be implementing in that particular logic in the child process. So for that purpose I'm using this one. So this part will be querying and then it will be sending the data in XML format. Now after receiving a request, I wanted to validate the request. After receiving a request, I wanted to validate a request. Well, how can you validate a request? There is a one shape called cleans in here. I wanted to validate a request. If my request is not in proper format, then it will be throw an error. And after that, after you validated it, let's say if I'm getting an empty customer ID, okay, if I'm getting an empty customer ID, I have to throw an error. So for that purpose, I'll be using the def here. Otherwise, ultimately it will be failure in the database. But I wanted to make sure how to check before itself. This is what I'm going to do now. Now let's connect this. You can just see that clean shapes enable you to validate a document field values, either repair or reject the document before further processing it. It is often helpful to use a clean shape before map shape so that invalid values can be corrected before potentially causing the errors. So it automatically validates the profile. How it is validating? Based on the profile type you are giving it. Now what would be my profile type here is, my profile type would be
XML.
XML profile here. So just select the XML profile. My request structure here. You can able to see all the structure. Okay. If the cleansing, what happens, it will cleansing verify what and all the things. Based on the profile, it will be verifying. If your profile specify the customer ID should be only this many characters, all the rules will be enforced here. Now what I am doing is, if the whatever the document it was passing to the clean shape, if it is proper, then only
Mm-hmm.
for the cleans path. If it has any errors, if it has any errors, what it will be doing? It will throw an error. Throw an error. So for that, what we are doing is we are just displaying that error into here.
Vima, can't we just try put a try catch kind of a thing?
Yeah, I'm coming that. So if any errors are available, let's say I wanted to send the response back. I want to send an error saying the so fault response. I want to send it. I want to use throw an exception. Want to throw an exception. Before throwing exception, I want to write an error message for the process log. So you can just write your free content like give a label link. So you can just mention that. So any process, okay, any process that if any process failed with the cleansing, what and all the corresponding error message will be storing, because I'm doing a cleansing here. If it is fine, there will be no issue, but if it is rejected, where I'll be storing that error message, that error message will be storing in a specific property called document property. That particular error message automatically captured in a predefined property that would be available under metadata. Go for base. Now you can see the cleans result message. It automatically set the value of the exception message with this property, cleans result message. So whatever the error is, whatever the document was coming, I'm just writing it to a process log. Since I have placed in the message shape, all the data will be coming as a current data. All the whatever the document, whatever the data it had generated in the message, that would be passing as a document here. The document I'm just displaying it to the log, and then I'm displaying a error message also here. Whatever the data was coming, I just wanted to put the same data here. 1 second, charging is over. So let's select the current data here, because I'm already getting the data. Whatever the message I want to display it, I just want already displaying it here. Okay, now if it is success, what I'm doing, I'm just going ahead further, just going ahead further. I'm just verifying it here whether the customer ID that is coming from the request is proper or not, is coming with a valid null value or not. Okay, sorry, let's.
The addition, why is it used here? I don't know. Is a customer ID?
So decision is basically just doing simple kind of validation, if else condition. First value will be checking with the second value equal to null. Okay, equal to null. By getting equal,
Why it has a value, right? Why are you defining it to static null value?
I'm just checking at runtime. I may get the customer ID value will be null value. I want to filter null customer ID by request is
Okay, that you want to kind of okay.
equal to, if it is null value, it will be going here, and then again I would be sending the same step here. Because if I don't put a notify, what happens? Whatever the data was coming, it will not show in log file.
Hmm. Got it.
In this case, we don't need to put because customer ID itself is null, right? So we can just mention the hard-coded error message saying that just put some decimal message. And then after that, if any issue is there, then you need to, if customer ID is not null and if the parsing also everything is done, then you need to call this process. Then you need to call this process. If you see for this process, as of now, I did not specify anything. But why do we use a
Hmm.
written document? Is using a written document, it sends a response back to the client. Written document would be the key one, it sends the response. And what data it has to send, that data you need to generate. Whatever the data is coming, it just send the back to the client. Let's click on configure. Now let's click on plus here. I want to create a child process here. Okay. Now I wanted to set this as a data pass-through. Whenever you want to use the child process, any process as a child process, you have to set start shape should be data process.
Hmm.
Data. Now I'm just giving it. Now what I'm doing here is I'll be just calling it database query connector. Go back here's get and then okay, let's create a new connection here. Password also would be same, right?
It's Dell underscore Bhumi.
Same, right? Password also.
No, no, it's VRV admin.
V.
RV
Okay.
admin.
This is correct, right?
Okay.
Click on apply, and then host would be a local host here, and port number would be 1521. Real time they make you the different host names and different port numbers. Database name would
ఇదే
be.
పోర్ట్ ఎక్కడి నుంచి ఫైండ్ అవుట్ చేస్తాం జనరల్లీ అవేమో.
In the installation summary you can see it. The installation of database we will see this one. Now go back to operation now. Operation I wanted to go with import wizard here. Click on place, getting a profile, select the statement and go for import statement. Atom. Select this one. What is that?
Local atom is because yeah, that's the last one.
Now just select the proper connection details. And now I don't want to retrieve all the things. I want to show all the table from all the users. I wanted to show user. I want to show the tables that are created in only this particular user called Dell underscore Bhumi. Just saying invalid username and password. Check whether whatever we given proper or not. Dell underscore Bhumi. Okay, let me just connect it here. Connect Dell underscore Bhumi and VRV.
Admin, ADMIN. It is Bhumi underscore Dell. Ma'am, tapu chesam. Sorry about it. It's Bhumi underscore Dell.
Okay. Connect and then user
Bhumi underscore Dell. Dell underscore Bhumi kaadu. Yeah. VRV admin.
VRV admin. Right. So we'll just modify this one. Now click.
ఈ డేటాబేస్ యూఆర్ఎల్ ఏదైతే ఉందో జనరల్లీ భూమి ఓన్లీ సపోర్ట్స్ ఫర్ ఆరకుల్ అండ్ మైక్రోసాఫ్ట్, రైట్?
No, it supports anything. And after that you can custom also.
The jar files.
Jar files by default it comes with only for SQL Server and Oracle database drivers. For rest of the things you need to configure the database drivers corresponding to your database. Let's say we have some open database are there, open source, Postgres, and then some of the database. You can just use the database when vendor will be providing what would be the database URL. That URL you have to select here custom instead of Oracle or SQL Server. Have to select custom,
Okay.
and then you have to give. because when you're using a default one, right? Let's say Oracle or SQL Server, MySQL, it automatically as you typing the all the configuration fields, it automatically gives you the all the URL will be automatically generated. But when you select custom, you have to give your URL. Why it is giving same thing? Bhumi underscore del. BOOMI underscore del.
VRV admin.
Got it here. We need to change the name also here.
Yeah.
Here you can see now this is the one customer. This is the customer I wanted to select. Click on next. Select all the fields. Now it's trying to connect to that particular database table and it's loading all the metadata about the table.
Mm.
What and all columns are there. Just now by default what we can do, we'll just select all the columns and click on finish. Customer DB customer get okay, now I wanted to filter all the records. Whatever the record I am getting, I wanted to filter all the records. Because I wanted to search from the request ID, whatever the request we are getting. For that we want to have the parameter here. Okay, so for that at runtime the question mark we can call it as a placeholder. This parameter, prepaid parameter, this prepaid parameter will be replaced at runtime. The question mark will be replaced by the this parameter value, where would be passing the value for this particular parameter. Will be showing that 7 close. So now we have even created the database table also. Now let's say if my database is down, or it might give you the wrong credentials. So what I can do, I have to use a try catch over here. But make sure if you put the try catch after this connector, if any failures are available after the try, then only the try catch will be catching it. If any errors occurred before to the try catch, it will not grasp it. That's the reason always we'll just wherever you want to capture it, you have to capture before the connector. Want to capture all the errors, you can just put the start in the try path. After the try, whatever the shapes has generated any errors, in that
Exception.
errors will be catching it. Let's say if you have some set property here, maybe before the try catch, if any error occurs in the set property, then this try catch will not handle it, because whatever the shapes that you mentioned in the try branch, only if any errors occurred in this try branch, then only this will be catching that exception. Now let me just pass a values over here. P underscore customer ID. For this, what would be value I need to pass? I need to pass the value from my the web services request. After that, I'll be getting a request. I'll be getting the response from the database. That response I have to format it to response database format to XML format. Here my request structure, my source profile should be database. Customer get, and then into which format I wanted to send. I want to send this into an XML format. Here I'll be sending in the right format for the database server, the web services response structure. So I'll be selecting the web services response structure over here. In real time, what happens when you are mapping from DB to here, you may be using some other customer, some other transformations using the functions. Save and close. In one of the fields we did not map it. You can see each and every time when you save right, each and every time when you save, there will be one revision will be created here. You can't revision
Yeah.
now. So it's only the first time. And if you made this as a second time, the change, log and edit, save,
Can we not pass over those revision? I mean, లేకుండా create ఏం చేయలేమా? Compulsory ఉంటుందా revision అది?
default. That's a default. But if you want to see the what the change you have made at the first revision, click on this green color
Yeah, okay.
default, automatically open it. But you can check the changes. What was the change? Okay, earlier we did not map this one. This time we mapped it. But if you see, you can see there is an error message. This component has been opened in read-only mode, and this view corresponds to the revision 1 of the component, which is not the latest version. But when you click on save and close, lock and edit, save and close, again this will be reverted back. It will be create a new version the revision 3, but the revision 3 would be same as this one, revision 1. So if you want to go for any revert, you just have to click on lock on edit and save and close. But if you don't want to revert it, you can just ignore it. Click on the cancel. Now click on save. Now if you have any error message there, I wanted to send that error message similarly same way here. Any error message there, if you don't want to raise that, if you don't want the process to be stopped even though after error message, what you can do, you can just simply stop this.
Okay.
Or you can add any other flow here. But if you have any error and you want to retry it, you can use this one and use the retry count. The retry count up to max 5, and each and every retry count the duration would be different. You can just see that first your first retry count when 1 means it will be retry after 30 seconds or 20 seconds, and then after when you change it to 2, it will retry after 30 seconds. When you change it to 3, maybe go for 50 seconds. Like that, there will be specific duration will be there. But when you click on save and close, You can see there is no process was coming here. There was no transition coming from here to here because child process. But if you, it means you are just a fire and forget. You're just triggering a sub process, child process, but you are not expecting any data from child process. But if you want to return any data from child process to the parent process, it means
Uh-huh.
you have to include again the written document over here. So written document would be basically used for two purposes. One is whenever you are working with a parent and child process, if you want to return any process or any data from the child process to parent process, then you have to use the written document. Other usage would be
Yeah.
web services. Whenever you want to return in
Mm.
any response
Yep.
web services, you will be using this one. You can see as soon as I put a written document, I got one arrow. If you don't have a written document, you won't get this transition. So as of now, I have done my process. Done. I'm ready to test my process. Let's click on test. You can see that Boomi does not currently support the direct testing of a listener process, as I told you earlier.
Mm.
The listener
Even in this environment, you can.
To test a listener process, we can create a process with the data that calls the listener processes. We create a process with the data that calls the listener process and provides data to it, or you can deploy the process to test environment and test it with the actual data before sending it to the process. Now what we can do, we'll see how to deploy the process. Click on save and close. Now go back to deploy tab. Okay, before going for deploy, what we need to verify here is what are the sufficient number of connections are available for this one. You can just go for, okay, even it is not allowing you to see the licensing count. Okay, fine.
Yeah, maybe I don't have the authorizations for this. I told you right.
So now let's see if it is not deployed, then we can see it. So now what we need to verify here is, let's select any let's select the one of the process that we just created it.
I don't think I can deploy it, Deva.
Why we can deploy it? Now you can see the process that we just created over here. But one thing you need to understand is when you are deploying a process that contains a child process, you don't need to deploy the child processes. Okay, as soon as you deploy a parent process, it automatically load all the child process for the deployment purpose. You don't need to manually deploy the child processes at all.
సో
Now
మనం డిప్లాయ్ ఎందుకు చేయాలంటే లైక్ డైరెక్ట్ గా ఎందుకు టెస్ట్ చేయలేము అంటే లైక్ ఎనీ పర్టికులర్ రీజన్.
see, is just a live mode is basically for developer debugging purpose. Test mode, it run in debug mode. Debug mode means it will be take a lot of time to process each and everything because it has to give the information, logging details and request data details each and every step. But in real time you don't need to display the data in that format. If you are running in the same format there, you will be taking a lot of time. You will get the process performance issues. And other thing is you cannot configure schedulings each and everything. Actually test run is basically for the developer purpose to debug an application, not for running purpose, just to debugging it. This is the actual if you want to run the process, you need to deploy and then you need to run it. Then it will not generate the logging. Logging will not generate the debugging mode. Logging level set to info only. If any errors, then only it will write the error message. Otherwise, it won't write any error message to the log files.
Okay, but in this case I don't have any attached environments, right? But still can I deploy?
Yes, wait. We'll see this one. Okay, for this one, go for attach environment. What and all environments we have? We have one of the environment, but it is if you observe it, this is saying that it's an environment, not an atom. Okay,
Oh,
this
okay.
mentioned an environment, not an atom. So what we need to do? So can we create one environment, or can we link our atom to this environment? If you want, we can remove that later. What
Mm,
happens, right? When you deploy it, what happens when you deploy it? Or else we can create a new environment, because you can see
mm,
all these atoms are unattached it. It means that you cannot able to deploy any of the process onto these atoms, because you can see, oh, you can able to deploy only the your process to an environment. What is the environment name here? QCO. You can see only one environment. But if you want to deploy one more new environment, maybe you can just create a one new environment. Let's say test.
okay. But can we delete it? I think they won't encourage it.
Uh, Not sure whether we can delete it or not. We have a permission or not. When we are able to create, definitely we'll be having a permission to delete also. Let's see if they might have given option or not. Uh, uh,
I doubt whether we can create.
okay, what we can do, we can attach our atom. Okay, we can attach our atom to this environment, because as of now it is showing under unattached atoms, right? You can just
Mhm.
see that what and all atoms in here still showing under unattached atoms, all will be showing here. Now we'll say because local atom. Okay, but if you once we select it here, it automatically attaching this particular atom to this environment. And if you want later, you can just delete this one. Oh, it is saying that we have so many process that is deployed it. Deployment rejected. Attempt to deploy 26 more standard connectors. Doing so would exceed your purchase for this connection. Class by 16 connectors. Please undeploy unused process to lower your usage count. Otherwise,
No,
contact
I think.
present data. Actually, you have deployed so many processes. And
True, true.
but whatever you basically don't require, we'll just go here and we can undeploy it quickly, because it's your local atom, right?
Okay.
What and all the process you have used it, you have deployed it. You can just go and we can undeploy it here.
No, I need to use most of those.
I think none of the process was deployed it here. Maybe
No,
you,
I didn't deploy. Maybe others deployed.
okay, others deployed it. Okay, maybe what we can do, but the thing is, since it's a cloud atom here, okay, it's a cloud atom, we cannot test this particular things from the Boomi process. Okay, now what we can do, we can directly deploy it to here. Sorry, not this one. Sorry, just go back here. I think we are not able to create an environment here.
No, I don't think we can get an environment. I don't have the rights.
When you're clicking on it, nothing is happening. It should supposed to get an environment details. Where we see this one. Okay, now let's move this. Go for it. This is the procedure of deployment. The thing is, it will be showing list of your environments. Select the which of the environment you want to deploy, or multiple environments, and then go for deploy, and you can click on deploy latest revision of the process. If you want to provide any comments, you can provide the comments. This is the only one place it basically verifies how many number of connections you have been utilized it. How many number of connections you have been utilized it. If any one of the process, if any one of your process is using more than the available connections, then the deployment will not be succeeded. You won't see this entry. But why it is when it is deployed here? Why can't it is using? Am I selected the right one here? This was your proper right because only right.
Hmm.
Okay, but let's go here. Atom management. We'll see what and all the process has been deployed on your atom. Select the because and
No,
all. Go for deployed processes here. No deployed. And why it is not aligned? Okay, let's see this one. Okay, as of now, the process is deployed it here on this atom. This cloud atom it is deployed it. If you see this one, you can able to see the. You can see this one. Okay, web service was triggered it. So one problem here will get it is because we are not using you know we are not using a database connector. We are database connector is installed on local and it will not be exposed to the cloud atom. You'll get a connection issue. So for that, what we can do is we can run in local and then we can paste the document here. First we'll try to run this. First we'll try to run this process in local. Okay, then
so
before
you have deployed it. Okay.
first we'll run in local first. Want to run in local? What you can do? You can just pass as a no data, or maybe you can just will try to call what they mentioned here is to test a listener process. You can create a process with that calls the listener process and provide the data to it. Okay, he is telling us create a one more web services client process. Let's say here we'll just call the web service client process. Debless client. Let's try to call the process here. Go for execution, process call. Let's see if we are able to get this. Go for here, development, web service. Yes, we can able to see this one, web services process. Yes, pass this one. But for this one, what I basically we required, we need to send the data in. The request data we need to send it. The request data we need to send it. Let's see what request data basically we need to send this. No. We need to send a request data to this process. Right. Then make sure we change the start state to no data. And then after that, whatever we get the response, what we can do, we can just put this to a notify. And what we need to pass it for this one is we need to pass the right data here, right input data. Let's click on here. I wanted to send, this is a customer. Request. Need to send a request in this format. The zero. And then this was my root element over here. And then what would be the element name? Element name would be cust ID. This cust ID we can just pass. You can just pass the trust ID would be 101. First, you can see whether this process was running as expected or not. You can save, you can test, select any one of the atom, anything, just run test. If this is not allowing us to test it, we can run in local, change the process query customer by ID underscore WS process, and then we can run it. Click on this one, click on, if you want to see the child process execution, you need to click on the blue arrow.
Okay.
It is taking this much time. Okay, let's let it run it. After run, we can see. But if you want to see the execution details, right? If you want to, when you deploy a web service, how do you confirm that what web service basically you are just where your web service will be listening it? You just have to go for shared web service server. For any item, you will be getting this option, shared web service server. Here for shared web service server, what you will get? You will get the default port number and then host name will be there. And this is the URL you just need to give it. In the sample WSL earlier I showed it, right, where your service will be listening. Your service will be listening on this host name and this port number. Let's say select the local item here and then go for the, you can see multiple options are, go for the shared web server. You can just see the use default value, use default value to some local, and then you got some host name. And authentication type by default it would be, authentication by default it would be none. But in case if you change it to the basic, it means when you give authentication none means whenever you are calling with these web services, you don't need to pass any username and password. But if you enable your username and password, let's say if you just select the basic, what happens? What happens? Select the basic. Basic, what happens? Go for user management. When you change this to basic, what happens? It will ask you to generate a token. Since the local item will generate it, you can see username would be your account ID. Username would be your account ID. Password would be the token that would be using it generating. But you should not generate each and every time, because whenever you give generate and it will give a password, what happens is this particular username and this particular password will be configured to call your web services in external applications. But when you click on regenerate, what happens? It will be generating a new token. New token. That time they will be get an error. Let's see what
Okay.
happens. This one. Okay, this is actually fail limit. What error message it is getting? Okay, just go here. This one I think. What error message was giving it? View log. Click on this icon. You get the complete error message. Severe errors occur during start check execution, terminating the process. Not sure whether this will run in this mode or caused by cannot load a read store from the unknown info. Okay, maybe something is all on. Okay, now what we can do, we'll just go back to the how we can go back to the parent processes, because we are in child process. How you can go back to the parent processes? Just click on this down arrow and it will be showing your list of process. What happens? Something is coming. We open this web service process. So instead of doing what we can do, we'll just simply click this one here itself. Because since we are not able to run this because this is the one just I run a WS client process. I just tried now. But earlier we don't have even this option of running in local also. What is
Hmm.
the option last time we have is because since we have a web service server connector is in start shape, we cannot able to run it. What we are doing, we just removing the web service server connector. Whatever the request it was coming, okay, whatever the request it was coming, that request I'm just placing it message, so that whatever the content I'm placing in the content I'm placing in the body, that would be generating an XML profile, because a web service also will get the request data from the client, and the request data would be sending as a current data to the rest of the process. So that's how I'm doing manually here. I pass the request manually here. Now let's try to run it, save. If it is properly our process is developed right, then we can able to see our execution, how the process was executed. Okay, you can see that this is validation got passed it here, and then even this condition also passed it here. 101 2 equal to null, 101 equal to null, no, condition is false, so that's it went for the false path. Let's see the execution data. Go for the child process execution, click on this process called blue arrow, and it will be loading your child process execution. And one thing is the try catch will be catching if any error occurred. But if you want to see the retry behavior, okay, want to see the retry behavior, what you need to do, retry behavior only you can see in the deploy mode only. Now you can see what is the response it is sending back. Just click on this, then click on this edge. You can see what is the response it is sending back. Now you can see, this was the process by actually sending the response. Okay, now let me grab the input data here. And this was the my actual data is coming. Okay, let me just save it, control C. It means that as per now, as per my requirement, my process was working fine. Okay, now let's go back to this process. So if you want to see the if you want to go back to parent process execution, go back to the parent process calls. Now you can see the same data is coming, but I wanted to see whether my process is navigating to all the paths or not. I forgot this one here. See? So since we copy pasted here, if you want to see any error message that is occurred during the try catch, instead of you configure this from the cleans result, you need to put this try catch here, because there are this is a predefined document property that automatically capture the error message if any document cleansing is failed. This is a predefined property that automatically capture the corresponding error message if any try catch use and try catch has failure. And this is another thing of business rules. We'll see that one. If you want to do multiple if else conditions, we'll use the business rules. If you want to do single if else conditions, we'll use the decision. That's the only difference. Nothing much. Now, what I wanted to show is extensions. Okay, what is an extensions? Okay, extensions is basically like environment specific values. Now I am running my process in development environment. I may be using different credentials for data connecting database. Later point of time, I may be using the deploying this process to UAT server. UAT server may be having the different credentials. A source and destination applications server credential might be different. In that case, if I'm directly if I'm not using an extension, what happens each and every time I need to go back to my process. I need to open my process in build tab, and then I need to change these corresponding values, change the corresponding values in directly in the connection tab, whatever. Let's say if I'm changing the database server credential for UAT, then I have to go back here and I need to change the credentials each and every time. Each and every time I'm moving my process to UAT production vprod, each and every time I need to open my process in local and in build tab, and then I need to open it. Instead of you doing all these things, what we can do, we can enable these particular extensions so that at runtime we can modify these values. Let's see how we can modify the runtime. Go back to the dynamic process. What do you want to do? Now I wanted to check my database, want to manage anything connection details, as I wanted to manage my username and password and then database host name and port number and then DB name. This is a four fields I wanted to modify at runtime. Other thing would be click on OK, then come back again. Another thing would be I wanted to pass save. Other thing I wanted to define a process property. Why I'm using a process property here is I'll pass a value runtime. Let me define one of the process property because I'm getting a 101. If I want to run my process for 201, again I have to come back. I need to change the value here. So I want to check all the null conditions also. So let's say for that what I'm doing here is let's go back and define one of the property here. It's a process property. Click on plus. Let's click on plus here. Let's define the cust ID here. Let's select this to be an integer type or whatever it's anything. Okay, now I have defined one of the property. Now I want to declare this particular property. I want to declare this particular property as a extensions. So how will I declare an extensions? So I'm passing this particular parameter. Means I'm for this request XML. I'm passing the customer ID as an extensions. How I'm saying an extension? Because this process property would be creating as an extensions here. Once you create a process property, it will automatically shows you the under process property. You can see this one. You can just select this checkbox. Click on OK. Now what I am doing here is let's click on test here. I want to see all my executions. Now if you want to pass a value at runtime, right, you just click on test environment. Since you are running in a test mode, you are passing the values here. But if you are running in deploy mode, I'll show you where you need to pass it. If you're running in deploy mode, right, you need to pass those things under environment extensions. You need to click on, let's say if your process was deployed to here, you need to click on your process environment to here, and then you automatically you have an option. You can just undeploy this and you can able to process it. You need to process the values. The way how we are passing similarly here, it would be the similar here.
Okay. So it's been
It is saying default, right? If you want to pass a values, when I say default, whatever the values you set in the connection level, that will be taking it. But if you want to instead of taking a default values, if you want to pass a specific values, you can just uncheck this one. This time I wanted to run with null value. Okay, just giving null. I'm not passing anything. Click on run test. I mean, when you are running the process, you are passing the values dynamically. So let's see this time what happens, right? Because since you are passing a value, null value, it is go back to this flow. You can see the execution. We already say an error message saying that customer ID received null value in the request. Please resend the request with cust ID. This time what I am doing here is even you can see since I configured it notify. I can see the corresponding error message also in the notify because the error message are configured in. You can see here. This was the one I configured in notify, writing the error message. If you want to see the complete error message, yes, you can go back and you can see the process terminating some errors document. Now, let's say this time I wanted to run this one with a, I want to run this time with a different document, different ID. Go back to process properties. Now I want to pass a value this time is 203 because this is a value basically not available in my database. Let's see what execution it gives us. You can just see it went here because it did not return any connections here. But with this particular customer ID, we did not retrieve any data from database. So process got failure in middle. If you want to
okay.
Just verify that. You just use the decision with the lookup, the way how we done last time the SQL lookup, and then you can proceed it. If you just the lookup is not available, then you can say that customer ID is not available in database. You can throw that kind of error message also. The way how we done last time the lookup, decision lookup, the decision
Yeah.
with the SQL statement. Because what happens in this case, right? If your particular record is not matching, if you're not available in database, your process was stopping here. It means for the front end user, you will not get anything. You will not get any response. You don't understand why the process was not giving a response. But as a Boomi developer, when you digging into the debug, you know that yes, we have process got failure. Process was not returning any data because there is no particular record matched with the customer ID that we are getting in the request. So you have to handle that situation, how to give the proper error message to the front end system. How you can give it? You can just put a decision here before calling this connector. The decision you execute the select statement. Take the count star. The count star equal to 0. Then you can send an error message saying that this particular customer ID is not available in database. So maybe he will understand by looking at the error message, he will understand the front end guy and he can modify the request to pass the right customer ID. It means that
Hmm.
I'm not coming back here and I'm editing the value. I'm passing the values dynamically. That's the advantage of the process properties.
Okay.
Right? You got it right? Now, okay. But when you are changing it, when you are going to deploy it back again, you're going to deploy it back again, make sure you you configure this one again. Operation. Come on. Sorry, not this. It's a web service server connector. Now check for operation. But we have to remove this test data. Otherwise, each and every time with respect of the data you are passing, you'll get only test data will be sending it. Now save this and now just go back here and redeploy the process. Now we'll see how to trigger that process. Where is this? You can just put search your process done directly. Stop you looking into this. Why we are not getting not thing. What we can do here is just go back to control F. You can use a browser search. Now go back here and redeploy this process because we done some changes. What are the changes we done? We have enabled the extensions. Before deployment of this process, we did not enable the extensions. So now let's go back. Now we have seen how to run locally. Now go back here.
Vema, but just a bit. Uh, is it okay if we kind of deploy this, because I think I'm not supposed to do this on this system? So can we remove it or can we trace it off? Something like that.
Yeah, we can just after that we can undeploy again.
Okay.
Say see and say anyway it's a development. Nobody will ask you why you deployed it. So anyway we can undeploy it. But if any can trace that, yes, I just for testing purpose I just done it. You can just tell that. So nothing what you are doing wrong, right? You are doing it in here. So now we can see, we can go back here. We can able to see the that particular process was deployed it here. Go for deployed process. Okay, you can see this process was deployed it here. And you can deploy, you can see in the listeners. Listeners means whatever the process which are deployed that has the listener as an action. Start shape. These are like web services process. You can see even in here. Now we are, if you go here, if you click on environment extensions here, Now I wanted to filter the process. I wanted to filter the process based on, if you don't filter it, it will show all the extensions for all the process. I don't want to show all the process and all the extensions. I want to see here. If you want to change any connection settings, you can see this one. You can able to change the values. If let's say if you're moving it to UAT system now, later, you can just
Mm-hmm.
directly go here and change the UAT corresponding details here. But whatever the credentials you specify in the database connections, that will be override the values when you uncheck it. If you don't uncheck it, it will take the from the connections window wizard from the connector connections. If you uncheck, and then if you uncheck and you pass any values, right, then it will take the, it will override values, override the with override this this is the value will be overwritten with the connections value. Whatever you mentioned in the connection, right, that values will be overridden. If you see here, here you mentioned somewhere some other credential, but if your default checkbox is checked, right, default checkbox is checked, then these values will be taken from this connection. But whenever you uncheck it, that time what happens, the values will be taken from the process reporting.
Okay.
Why this is blur? You're able to see these wizards next tabs.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to,
But it's not clear, right?
yeah, it's not clear for me, it's not clear. Okay, what we can do, we can just refresh it this one. What we can do, we'll just remove all these values. We'll just close one by one component.
Yeah, we are too. For me, it's a too much of a dose today.
Yeah, but this is last step. We, without this, if you're telling entire thing is waste.
Yeah, yeah.
Run it. That's the crucial part, right?
Absolutely. It give you a comprehensive idea all of it. We are recording this, right? It's very important that I have this recording also.
Yeah, boss. Recording. Don't worry.
లేకపోతే నాకు చాలా కష్టం అయిపోతుంది.
Go back to atom management. So now you know where to set the process extensions in local when you're running in local. If you're running in from the deploy mode, you know where to set an extensions, right?
Hmm.
You have to go
Yeah, I mean,
environment extensions. You need to select your process. You have to filter based on your process, and then all the extensions that are you set specific to your process will be visible here, and you can able to change it. Let's say when you select this one, right, so you, for this particular process we have defined a process properties also and extensions. If you uncheck it, you can pass the values. If you don't uncheck, right, whatever the values you specified in the connection level or at the original object, that value will be taken. Okay, now here, now we are good. Now what is the host name and port number? We need to access it. Now we need to call the web service. Now we are ready to deploy. We deployed it as a service, but how can I call it? In this case, Boomi itself is a server, and Boomi itself is a calling as a client. Means Boomi web service, we are calling to a Boomi process again. Let's go back here. Now we need to call this web service. How to call a web service? As I told you that we need to use the web services so client connector. That what we are just doing it. Just a one step, just only one step this one. Go back to WS client process, and then go back here and take the URL, because we need to go back to this one because we have deployed. As of now only one atom is there. Now atom was deployed on here, and we need to see what is the URL here. Just click on here, copy, and if you see, because we shared web service server, right, when you deploy any web service process to an atom internally acts as a web server. Atom internally acts as a web server, so that what where it will be accessing as internal server, This is a host name and this is a port number. So that port number and host number would be required whenever the client is calling. Let's configure here web services SOAP client connector. Let's call this one. Call this as web service. Now we default go for connection because we need to call the web service. How will I call a web service here? This is the endpoint here. This is the place exactly my service was running. And apart from this, no, we can't go here and it's not allowing to navigate that. Save it, then it will be allowing us to back. Then open it one more thing here. Because once you create a web service in Boomi, right, you have two options. Either you can call it as a REST service or you can call it as a SOAP service. When I say REST service, you can call this particular service as a SOAP service. Means you can use a web service SOAP client connector. But when you are calling the service as a REST client, you can use a HTTP client connector. Now, what would be the operation here? This was the see when you are calling a SOAP web service, you need to append this is a one for that URL.
Okay.
Okay, where we are calling this is in the connection. You need to call this like this. You have to append that particular to here. And same thing where the URL will be available. URL would be available in the sense there is a one shortcut that where your web service, whether your web service will be running or not. For that, what would be the shortcut here is, let's go back here. There are some web services. There are some web service which is hosted on public web service registry. Web service registry. It means there are some services which are hosted local public. Means anybody can access this. Anybody can access these things. If you just click on the service repository, it just shows the number of services which is deployed publicly. And let's say just click on the stock code. When you click on this one, if you want to say, and we can see there is a two URLs. WSDL URL means when you want to access a WSDL. When you click on this one, right, what happens? Let's say if we have deployed one of the service called query customer by ID underscore WS. How do you know that this particular service is running? You will go back, since you are a Boomi developer, you will go back to the process reporting and you will just see that whether process was deployed it or not. And it was in listen is action. But as a front end system guy, how can we know that whether your service will be listening or not? This is the shortcut would be whatever the listening URL, where will be having listener URL, you'll be having the listener URL in the last part here. This one, this listening URL. Come on, this listening URL. If you just view this listen URL, give this listener URL with a WSDL. When you click on here and you click on browser, it's supposed to show all the WSDL content. When it will show means if your service is running. Similarly, in our case, most of the times, right, that your endpoint URL and the WSDL URL will be same except this part question mark WSDL. As I told you earlier, when you're calling a web service, if your authentication is enabled, then you need to pass the corresponding details. If authentication is not enabled, then we need to use the default security none, where we can see the authentication details. Go back to the item management, and here shared web server, you can see authentication type is none. If you enable basic, we already see that because the cloud atom we did not enable. If you enable the cloud for the local atoms, right, you can change the basic. Earlier already we have seen username would be your account ID and password would be the token. The same thing we need to pass it here. Now as of now we are not using any security things, we are just taking everything as default. Now we have configured the connection here. You can see the connection here. This is what we just configured. What is the connection we configured? We just give it the endpoint URL where my web service was running it. Now go back to the operation now, because if you want to call a web service, maybe the one service can have multiple multiple operations might be deployed. When I say
Hmm.
Each process you deploy is a one operation in the web service. In Boomi point of view, each process will be an one web service operation. Now if you want to call, we have number of web service, number of process was deployed on this atom web service. But how will I know that which service I need to trigger? That you need to configure it here. Click on plus in the operation wizard and then go back to import wizard and then select the connection that we just created it here. See, the import wizard will be similar for all the connectors. Click on next. Because we are deployed on a cloud atom, we just select the cloud only. Sometimes it may require username and password. This is the way how we need. Once you, if your connection is resolved properly, and then you can automatically your request and response profiles will be imported automatically. Your XML request profile and response XML profiles are automatically generated, and even your object also, right? Object also will be populated with query customer by ID. Query customer by ID. But you'll see in the local when you deploy a process in local, right? You can able to change this. I'll send you one of the video that has these details. Because when you
Okay.
the cloud atoms, you maybe need to pass some kind of credentials details. If you get, you will be getting the drop down list. You'll get the drop down list. What and all shape, what and all the connections is supported. Or let's say we'll take the same thing. We'll take this stock code. Anything, right? Accessing the web service, calling the web service will be same thing. Only the difference would be, let's go back here. If you change this particular thing to here, edit this, because this is a accessible cloud, right? Public, and then we can just because for giving a session on web service, we have to have all the access. Should be able to deploy a process. We should be able to run. Once if you are proper, right? If you are able to connect to the particular host and port number, you'll get this kind of an object. In this object, what is the web service we define? We given the web service operation query customer by ID. As soon as you click on select the object type in the drop down and click on next, right? It automatically shows you the list of corresponding request and response profiles automatically gets generated. You can see that. You can't finish. You can see as of now object was not configured. Now object will be configured to get code. You can see request structure already configured it here. And even you can see the response structure would also been configured here. Only thing, if you want to trigger a web service, right? If you want to trigger a web service, what is the procedure is? Click on save and close. You just configure it here. Click on OK. Just make sure notify should be configured with current data. Because since this web service is not deployed by it's not hosted on our end. This is hosted on public. So means for this we no need to deploy our service. So web service already hosted on cloud or public. When you run it, this one here, it automatically call that web service. But as of now, we are just configure the web service, but we did not send the request. What request we need to send? That request you need to pass it over here on the configure. Go for parameters. But if that process we are able to connect it, that one good. Actually, we can see the same thing. Static maybe symbol you can just use string, because this is the way how you need to pass an input depends on the operation you depends on the web service you're invoking. Because we are not sure this web service was developed by somebody else, we are not sure what exact structure we need to pass it. As I told you that once we create a web service in Boomi, either you can call the web service as a using the SOAP or REST. SOAP means web service SOAP client connector. REST means HTTP client connector. You can see the web service are triggered and you can see the response here. This was the response we got it. We didn't get some exception message, but we got some error. We got some response. This is how we need to call a web service. But if you want to call a HTTP service, right? HTTP service, what
Mm-hmm.
you need to do? Only thing you need to configure HTTP
Client. Yeah.
connector, but you need to have a send, not a get. Okay, you need to use send. But for this connection component, right? What you need to give? You need to give the endpoint URL of this one because let's say if you're calling the Boomi service that we just deployed it, you need to give this copy. You can't save. After that, what we need to append, as I told you that if you are using REST based, you need to append this one for that URL. This one you need to append it. But for the operation, what you need to do? Ideally, when you are creating an operation, right, we don't have an option of selecting an XML profile, but as of now, we have an XML profile is a request, right? So we can select it. But this is not a recommended way. Recommended way would be you have to use the web service SOAP client connector, and you need to import. You need to see the import wizard that we just do for stock code, and you'll get the automatically request and response profile will be generated. That request and response profiles you need to use it here. Got it right?
I'll go through the videos, Vivan.
We need to, for the, when you're calling a HTTP, right, you need to send a request and response profiles. But where do we get
Correct.
response profile? We should not use this request and
Yeah.
response profile. We need to use the request and response of the web services process. After you create a
Okay.
service process, you'll get the envelope structure would be there. That how we configure it just now. Just now we have done import wizard here in the web service SOAP client connector for the stock code. Just now we done it here. Go for operation.
Correct.
You can just see using the import wizard, you have configured it here. When we configure it here, you'll be getting the request and response profile. This request and response profile has to use whenever you're calling into, whenever you're calling the same thing in what I can say, calling HTTP connectors. Dealing with REST-based connector, you have to use. But profile, we don't have an option of import wizard in HTTP connector. We have import option only available here, right? Import option available only here in the web service SOAP client connector. But when you configure HTTP connector, we don't have an option to import wizard. What this one? Okay. This is the way. Two things how we can call the.
So based and
If you want to call a web service through SOAP protocol, you can directly use the web service SOAP client connector, and you can use the import wizard to configure the request and response profile. But if you want to call a web service on the REST base or HTTP client connector, you need to use the request and response profile that are generated using the SOAP client connector, and you need to configure that request and response over here. Let's see particular service will be triggered it or not. Go back to my mouse is not working or since we are accessing a remote has a problem. Go back to process reporting. If any process got triggered, right, you will see that process will be triggered here. If this was proper, right, then we'll get the process would be triggering here. Connection timeout. If this was properly running, and you will see there was one instance will be running over here. Even if it is failure also, if web service server connector is able to receive a request, we'll see one entry here. Try it if you have an access for local atom, you just deploy this process to local atom and then try it.
mm,
Then it will be more clear.
okay.